There it is. Tonight I get the privilege to talk about one of the most beloved and important objects in the Nelson-Atkins collection. It's the Guanyin of the Southern Sea. It's a Buddhist sculpture that was carved from one very large poplar tree trunk in northern China sometime between the 11th and 12th centuries. The Guanyin will serve as a springboard as I discuss some important issues that pertain to all art museums, issues of exhibiting and protecting works of art. As this museum's mission states, the Nelson-Atkins is dedicated to the enjoyment and understanding of the visual arts and the varied cultures they represent. It strives to achieve this goal by adherence to the highest professional standards, of course, always highest professional standards, in the collection, preservation, exhibition, and interpretation of works of art. It's a pretty broad mission and covers a lot of ground. So for tonight's presentation, I'm going to address the more specific question of how an art museum reconciles its mission of exhibiting a work of art versus the need to physically protect the piece for future generations. A museum has a whole cast of talented characters who work to achieve its goals and its mission. Familiar to many of us are curators who steward and build our collections and make the decisions about which objects are exhibited. There are conservators who are highly trained individuals who work to secure and preserve the objects in our collection. And there are also educators like myself who help make the decisions and actions of curators and conservators accessible for the broadest possible audience. I wouldn't be doing my job as an educator if I didn't anticipate some questions you all must be having right now about this guy behind me. First of all, who or what is Guanyin? Well, Guanyin is the Chinese version of the Indian Avalokiteshvara. And Avalokiteshvara is Sanskrit for roughly the Lord who looks down with compassion. He is a bodhisattva who responds to the needs of worshipers and answers pleas for spiritual welfare, protection, and well-being. We need a little bit of his action in this day and age. Bodhisattvas are a whole category of enlightened beings who have foregone their own attainment of nirvana in order to help others attain that ultimate state of enlightenment. And nirvana is a release from the cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth that, according to Buddhism, marks all human existence. In short, then, the Guanyin is someone who is there to help us and act on our behalf. If you look at this sculpture, you see that his entire appearance acts as a symbol for what he does. He sits in a position called royal ease with his leg up and his hand sort of rested over it. It's an open and inviting posture. It tells us that he is accessible to anything that we need him to perform for us. At the same time, he's perched on the edge of that rocky outcropping, as if he's going to jump off, spring to life. He's a man of action. He can satisfy our needs at the drop of a hat. People the world over revere the Nelson-Atkins Guanyin for its grace, its beauty, and its spiritual power. There's this sort of thought that art, especially art that was created originally for religious purposes, somehow dies when it comes into a museum's collection. And I think that for anyone who has stood in the galleries in front of this work of art, it retains its spiritual presence. It retains this kind of pull, this attraction that, regardless of whether you believe Buddhism or not, is undeniably there. It is in many ways the Mona Lisa of Kansas City. I became fascinated with the Guanyin while working on a forthcoming web interactive feature. And the interactive will provide visitors, if all goes well, the opportunity to explore the Guanyin from two important perspectives. First, folks can explore it in its original life as a spiritual object enlivened by religious belief and ritual practice. Or folks can explore this object in its current life as an art museum object whose permanence sheds light on the past. In other words, visitors will be able to see the object through the eyes of curators and conservators. And what is usually hidden will be revealed. And I love this particular image because we see overlaid on top of the Guanyin a series of X-ray images that show us, among other things, where nails were used, where a whole host of other things that would never be available to the naked eye in the galleries are now accessible to users of this interactive website. The site will also present really cool facts that will serve as gateways that will hopefully entice folks to explore the Guanyin as a spiritual or as an art museum object. An example of one of these enticing facts is that the Guanyin was originally painted naturalistically with bright colors. That in and of itself is pretty cool. And if we look here on the stage, we see the Guanyin as it appears today. This is what it looks like now. But we also see a reconstruction view over here showing what the Guanyin looked like with its original paint job from the 11th or 12th centuries. Now, that in and of itself, like I said, is pretty fascinating, but you can carry it a few steps further, and this website's going to allow folks to do that. For instance, you can look at it again through the eyes of a conservator and find out that conservators took pinhead-sized samples of paint from the Guanyin, examined them microscopically, found those lowest layers of paint, were able to deduce what the original appearance may have been, and then fed that information to our really talented team of designers here at the Nelson-Atkins, who took all of that and were able, through the powers of Photoshop, to do what we certainly couldn't do to the actual object, and that's recreate what it looks like. And I have to give the disclaimer that this is a work in progress. By the time the interactive comes out, it's going to be even more stellar, even more beautiful, so stay tuned. Folks can also find out more about how paint was actually very critical to the spiritual life of this particular object. That during its history, it must have underwent about 3 or 4 repaintings or refurbishments. As a spiritual object, the Guanyin's appearance changed through the centuries to keep up with changing tastes and to fulfill slightly different needs. The way we've approached this web interactive begins to address how this museum reconciles the exhibition and protection of its objects. The exhibition and preservation of art are very much connected and ultimately work together to help us facilitate about the objects in the collection. This knowledge can come either through a work's public accessibility in the galleries, or during behind-the-scenes conservation projects, or during private scholarly examination. It's understandable to think of exhibiting and protecting a work of art as separate and distinct goals. And I remember telling someone once that I worked in an art museum, and he kind of stared at me a little blankly and kind of furrowed his brow, and he asked me, "You work in an art museum, what do you do? Hang the pictures on the walls?" And at the time, I thought this question really showed a limited understanding of the numerous professions support an art museum's mission. The Guanyin Interactive Project, for example, utilized the expertise of curators, conservators, educators, marketing staff, design staff, information technology staff, the list goes on and on. Our art handlers weren't among those groups, but we have talented art handlers who do a whole host of things in this museum, including hanging the pictures on the walls. The more I think, though, about that guy's question, the more I realize that it does indicate a clear understanding of an art museum's mission to exhibit art and make knowledge accessible to the broadest possible audience. Everyone in this room, I think, regardless of how much you know about art museums, understand at some fundamental level that we put art up there for your benefit, and that the experience of an art museum is to go into the galleries and look at a work of art and somehow get some kind of interaction, some type of experience in front of that particular work. Less well understood is that art museums in the U.S. exhibit on average only about 1 to 7% of the artworks they own. Even with the new block building edition, the Nelson can show only about 6% of its collection at any one time, which means the other 94% must remain in storage. This is due largely to space. I mean, even if we wanted to, we simply could not exhibit all nearly 35,000 objects at any one time. It would be impossible. But it's also because of some art sensitivity to climate and light. It seems a little tragic that art objects must remain in storage, but that they do does not mean that they will remain there indefinitely. Nor does it mean that they are entirely inaccessible. Museums, like the objects they contain, live multiple lives and change over time. Some objects may be deemed critical and worthy of collecting in one era, but become less important for the stories told by the next generation of curators. Like Guanyin, that underwent several refurbishments over the centuries, museums change to respond to fashion and tastes and to satisfy the needs of an ever-changing audience. That's why museums keep objects indefinitely. The stories art tell change as time changes, and to stand the test of time, art needs the benefit of time itself. Issues of time and multiple lives bring us back to the sculpture behind me. If I can draw out the Buddhist metaphor of life, rebirth, and enlightenment, then the Guanyin, like most of the art in this museum, is far from dead. It is living its second or even its third life. Regardless of whether it shares its secrets through its public exhibition in the galleries, through study by an individual scholar, or through discoveries made during its preservation, the role of art museum objects, like the role of the Guanyin Bodhisattva himself, is ultimately to help us all attain some form of enlightenment. Thank you very much.